Cool. Cool. So this is actually my first Zoom interview.
Okay.
So we're doing the knowledge, right? And I don't know if is it your first Zoom?
No, it's not. I've done recently. I've done about maybe 3 of them, and I appreciate them. So I'm still learning how it operates, but I appreciate the whole conversation and visually how it enhances everything.
And I actually put it in high definition, so I look forward to seeing the final product, but even more the journey.
Okay.
You know, and I was actually what I'll do. One of the things I'll do is I don't know if you won't be able to. Can you see that? Can you see that?
I can see it.
Perfect. What I'll do is sort of in between look at some of your photos and kind of get your response and and some of your stories regarding the photos.
Right.
I was going through your Instagram and your massive photo collection, and I was just like, wow, I was blown away. I had to scroll down and to get through some of my, not only some of my favorites, but like your very iconic photos. So I was, and then I don't know if it's, and you have to jog my memory, but I hope, hopefully toward the end, there'll be a surprise in a sense of, I'm wondering your reflection on something. So I think in doing my research and listening to your interview with Black Thought, that not necessarily a surprise, but more like how your reflection on your journey maybe full circle in a sense of when you started, right?
Okay.
But before we start talking about your photography career and experience, most people know, especially those who are woke or who haven't come in contact with you, know you have knowledge of self. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen all your interviews, but when did you get knowledge of self?
Be honest with you, I got knowledge of self when I opened up this book here, Black and White America. This was my introduction to knowledge of self. I picked up this book when I was about 9 years old. My father had it sitting on the coffee table. It was signed edition. He had a really vast library of books that I was astonished with. But it was something about this particular book, Black and White America, that really resonated with me as a young child. And I remember so vividly opening up the book and going through it page by page by page. 9, 10 years old now. And it was so complicated. I used to have a dictionary with me to try to decipher words that were foreign to me, words that I never learned in school, in Catholic school, like racism, discrimination, the Ku Klux Klan, rape, homosexuality. It introduced me to a whole new vocabulary. In addition to the fact that it exposed me to photography, it was something about the words of Leonard Free, because it was a journal of his experience. You know, the word, everything, all the text was his actual journals of things that he was witnessing. So I'm 9 years old. I'm trying to understand, what is racism? I'm seeing the Confederate flag for the first time. I'm seeing signs of discrimination and whites only. One photograph that really resonated with me that made me want to wonder, like, what's going on here is, and it stuck with me. And it's two of them. They were like back to each other. And this photograph right here, we must have justice. And it was
the nation.
Say again?
That's a nation Islam brother, right?
This is a Muslim brother in Midtown. So this photograph introduced me to, first of all, the nation, and then it was something about the title that states, we must have justice regardless of the price. And I'm seeing a dog being a police officer has his attack dog on a black man. So it's at this point where I start to come into the knowledge of myself through this book. It's like it was tailor-made for me, Black and White America. It allowed me to realize that as a young Black man, I'm living in a very different world. Again, I'm 9 years old. I'm living in the projects. I've never seen anything like this before. It was never taught in school. You know, I went to a Catholic school that was predominantly Irish and Italian, and we never learned about Black history. You know, so whatever reason, it's like it was almost like it was God sent that of all the books that my father had within his home, Black and White America would sit on the coffee table. And he never knew that I would go through this book every day, and how this particular book here will become almost like a roadmap to where I'm at to this very day. Brother, it's amazing how this one book transformed my whole entire life. Black and White America. I understood at that point that I was different, because the boys, the young men in this book identify with me. I'm looking at children that look like me. I've never seen anything like this before. I've never seen Black people in a photography book like this before. We had our family albums, but it's something about this book that put me on a road to self-discovery. One book put me on a path of curiosity. From that point, I started reading all the books in my father's library. It was in my father's library. He had a subscription to Playboy magazine, and I would read that from cover to cover. In Playboy magazine, I was introduced to Malcolm X for the first time. I'm 9 years old now. You know, and
in Playboy?
Say again?
The Malcolm X article is in Playboy?
It is. Alex Haley was on assignment, and Alex Haley, before the book or the autobiography of Malcolm X became a book, Alex Haley, he did an interview that was for Playboy magazine. So I'm reading it. I'm seeing Malcolm X for the very first time. I'm reading an article with Martin Luther King for the first time. I'm learning about the American Nazi Party for the first time, because Alex Haley also did an interview with Lincoln Rockwell, who was the leader of the American Nazi Party in America. So I'm 9 years old getting exposure in Playboy magazine, which was like what the internet is to us today. What Playboy was back then, because I didn't know at the time, and I just learned that recently, that it had some of the best writers that wrote for that publication, Alex Haley being one of them. Not only did it have really powerful photography that taught me the beauty of photography, of light, composition, but it was the articles that captivated me as well. It's the artwork in the magazines. I learned that John Wayne, the iconic actor, was a racist because I read an interview with him in Playboy magazine. Again, my father never knew about that. I just had this profound love for knowledge, and I wanted to read every book he had in the library. I mean, he had books on misogyny, he had books on art, and I just read everything. And then when I got tired of reading books in his library, I would go to in his personal library, I would go to the local library where I would grab up all the magazines I could read. Life magazine opened up my world to a whole nother atmosphere I was unaware of. I became introduced to war in Vietnam, both from Playboy magazine, but also through Life magazine. I studied National Geographic magazine. So between Life magazine and National Geographic, I got a pretty good balance to what was going on. So I'll say at that particular stage, I started to get knowledge of myself early on. I had a hunger for it. And as time would progress, I was introduced to a book by Eric C. Lincoln called Black Muslims in America. And it further helped me to understand what was going on in America and who these people were that lived on my floor. Because on my floor in the projects, there was a family that was in the Nation of Islam. And they were very righteous people. The older brother, Brother David, was very kind to me, you know, and his friends would come by, and they were much older brothers. And it was just something very beautiful about their spirit that grabbed me as a young child. And I wanted to know more about that particular culture. So early on, I started to evolve and try to understand what is my purpose in life. And I had this constant thirst for knowledge, because again, I wasn't getting into Catholic school. And then what I was seeing on television it confused me. Back in that day and time, we didn't have a lot of Black programs. So Tarzan would be on. And I was very conflicted with what I was seeing. Again, I had no one to sit down with to explain to me what was going on. You know, so for some, that was just normal. In Africa, there was no civilization. You have this European man that's going over and he's conquering. And then we had the Bowery Boys. Nothing really represented me until the Jackson 5 cartoon came on. And now I'm seeing young men that mirrored me in age. And it started to just open me up. But I was always in search of this knowledge. Every chance I got, I had this inquisitive mind to want to learn more about me. And I always rebelled. Back in those days, we had what you call Black Solidarity Day that took place, I believe, the second Tuesday in November. where a lot of the public schools took off from school, and there was a great celebration going on in the project, and I saw the red, black, and green flag for the first time. I'll never forget getting a button that said, "I'm black and I'm proud," and I wore it to Catholic school, and my mother ripped it off my chest, like, "What are you doing?" And at that time, I realized that something is going on here. Why can't I have pride in myself? You know, so again, I start to want to know more about what was going on. The music at that time, it fed my soul. Because at that time, we had two forms of music for the most part. We had socially conscious music and we have love songs. So it's something about James Brown's song, "Say It Loud, I'm Black, I'm Proud," that resonated with me. It's something about Curtis Mayfield, "Back to the World," and a lot of the artists back then that they were saying things, the Supremes, Marvin Gaye. I took in all that. When Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" album came out, it resonated with me. It helped me to understand who are these men that were coming home with these uniforms on, these military uniforms on. Who are these men? Why was this woman screaming when these two Army personnel came? And I would find out later on that she came to notify her that her only son died in Vietnam. So I started to gain knowledge of self then. At that point, I became very curious. The very first movie that my father took me to see as a child, I remember so vividly, was John Wayne's movie, The Green Beret. So at that early age, I'm 9 again. Very interesting age. I'm coming into a very deep stage of my life. Still in my single digits, but I have an inquisitive mind. At that early age, I want to know what's going on in Vietnam and why is this war going on? Why is it called a dirty war? Who are communists? What are communists? Where's Southeast Asia at? So my curiosity led me to the path of knowledge of self early on. So it's like I've just been on this path forever. And I just continue to want to learn and meet different people throughout my path. Because one of the things that inspired me too, that really helped to define my understanding of life being a path, it was a series that came on back in the days in the early 70s, I believe 71, 72. I'm about 11 now, and it was called Kung Fu, with an actor who by the name of David Carradine.
Right.
It was a series that came on, and it really grabbed me because it showed this Amerasian young man who's being trained in the Shaolin Temple in China. And he's a young man come of age at the age in which I was at that time. And he's going through this training to embrace the martial arts, but at the same time, have knowledge of himself. So in watching that, and then once he got knowledge of himself, he came to North America. And in watching that, I realized at that point that I am on a path and I gotta have knowledge to survive. I have to have physical skills to survive. And I'm going to meet different obstacles on this path. I'm going to encounter people that are going to hate me. So that program kind of like further gave me an understanding that life is a path and there's going to be obstacles and challenges based on who you are. For that particular actor, Kane, he was Amerasian. He was hated because of his mixed blood. For me as a young Black man coming of age, I started to realize that because of my skin complexion, there's going to be people that are going to hate me. So in order to survive, I have to equip myself with as much spiritual armor as I can get in order to navigate through the difficulties of life. So again, to go back to your original question, my knowledge of self came early on in life, and it continued from each degree that I would approach. I would get deeper and deeper into the knowledge. There was always a thirst for knowledge of self. And then again, I gotta mention, Roots. When Roots came on January 1977, it further helped me to understand the seriousness of what happened to the Black man in America, because I was introduced for the very first time to the transatlantic slave trade. And that produced more curiosity, you know. So that miniseries that came on, that America was fixated on, it just opened up so much curiosity. So I just wanted to know more about my name and what was a slave name? Why were we brought to this country? You know, why would we being mistreated in such a way? And I never had anyone to talk to about it. So it's through the study of independent study that I started getting answers. Because again, my father never talked about it. He was very conservative. My mother was neutral. She never really had too much to say about it. So in order to find it, I learned early on, if you want to gain knowledge of self, you go to the library because that's where all the lies are buried.
And before you go into how you started getting into photography, somewhere in that process, did your dad teach you, or you again learned on your own?
Not at all. My father my introduction to photography came way before I even picked up the camera. It's the photography books I saw in publications that he had in the house that introduced me to the power of photography. So before I even physically picked up a camera, I was constantly studying that powerful language of photography because he had such a vast collection of books. I was drawn towards the photography in Life magazine and National Geographic again, but I was also drawn towards the photography that he would bring home in these different publications, you know, photography magazines. He had a Time Life series of books that showed me photography. But what interested him was war photography. So early on, I was seeing wars that weren't even spoken about on the news or in the daily newspapers. I learned about the war in Biafra in Nigeria. I learned about the 6-Day War with Israel and the Palestinians' fights for their statehood. I learned about all these other proxy wars that were going on in the country through photography. So I learned the language of photography early on before I picked up the camera. I didn't know who the photographers were who were taking the photographs, but I knew it was a very important language that was exposing me to a world outside of my community. It wasn't until 1975 that I developed an even deeper love for photography, and I decided that at this particular juncture in my life, I need to be a photographer. And what happened was, I was about 15 years old, still in junior high school, and I had a really good friend of mine who always spoke about his cousin being this strong warrior brother. They taught him how to fight. They gave him knowledge of self. And he says, I want you to meet him one day. And my partner's name was Winston. And he says, you know, on this day, I want you to come with me to my cousin's house, and you got to meet him. He's a really deep brother. So I go to his house in Brooklyn, the Crown Heights section, and I meet his cousin. His name is Cornell. And I speak about him often because he changed my life. In going there, Cornell was the warlord of a gang called the Badass Stompers. They were division in one of the largest gangs in Brooklyn called the Jolly Stompers. That was a gang that was around since the 1950s. My mother remembered the Jolly Stompers. The Badass Stompers was a division of that particular gang. And this brother I met, Cornell, held the position of warlord. And at that time, he went by the street name of Sundance. So this is Winston's cousin. We go to his house. I remember vividly going into this step down apartment, and Kool and the Gang was playing, and was a certain vibration in his room, and it was a space very much like what I have right now. But what made it unique was the photo albums that he had. He had photo albums about this size. And within these photo albums were photographs of the gang, the Jolly Stompers and the Badass Stompers that he took. And the photographs were unbelievable because these were brothers that were pretty much older than me, and they were very dapper. They wore beaver hats, they wore trench coats, Playboy shoes. Brothers was clean, unlike the impression that we get of gangs with cut-off jean jackets with colors on it and writing. This particular gang was a mixture of African-American and Caribbean. So they brought those two cultures together and formulated this gang. And so with the Caribbean influence, we saw the Clarks, the British Walkers, the straddle jackets, the London Fog 3/4 trench coats, the Kango hats, the Spitfires, and even with the Jamaican culture, they wore a lot of the beaver hats. A lot of these brothers wore beaver hats that were all with baby oil. And they were sharp, they were debonair. When I saw those photographs, pages after pages after pages of these beautiful, well-composed black and white and colored images, I was totally blown away. And I said at that point, I want to be a photographer. And I left his house excited, and I had a clear purpose right now. And I remember going home, practically running home, and I snatched up my mother's 110. She had like, back in the days, they had bar parties, and everyone pretty much had these disposable cameras about the size of a camera like this here, with ice cube type flashes. I snatched the camera, and I just possessed it as my own. And I said, I want to be a photographer. And my next day at school, I went and I started photographing my classmates. And it was like magic. It gave me the ability to see through my third eye right now. You know, prior to that, I just had the ability to see. But once I looked through that viewfinder and I started to look at life around me, it opened up my third eye. And I developed a power that I didn't even realize that I had. I developed a language that I didn't have, because prior, I struggled with stuttering. Whatever reason, I had difficulty speaking early on. And it was a battle with me that no one knew. That's why I guess I spent a lot of time in the library searching for answers, because I wouldn't raise my hand in the classroom, because I just struggled trying to get words out. But once I picked up that camera and I looked through the viewfinder, it not only did it allow me to see through my third eye, but now it gave me a voice. It put me in a position to communicate with people right now. And I first started photographing my friends, where it gave me purpose. Because prior to that, I didn't have any purpose. I might have been a student, you know, and an aspiring graffiti artist, but I had no clear purpose. Once I picked up the camera, I put down the spray paint can. My partners continue on because they all at that time, they embraced graffiti. It was a very popular thing there. And that's just what we did. And I wasn't really good at it. It didn't really inspire me in that fashion, but it was something about the camera now that it was a magical device. And I saw it pretty much as an apparatus that can freeze time and motion. And I almost became like I was an alchemist. I was able to freeze time and motion. So I embraced it. I documented my friends. I started to have a new name now, which I was a photographer, and I carried my camera everywhere I went. I remember what me and my friends, we would chip in and buy film because we were still young and didn't have jobs. So we would put in our quarters and our dimes and get film, and we would photograph. I would photograph my peers, and we would take it to the local drugstore, get it processed, and then I would pass out a lot of the pictures to my associates and keep some for myself. And that's where it began. And again, the camera became like a compass too. Not only was it a time machine, but it was also a compass that now put me on the path.
Huh. How old were you when that happened?
I was 15 at that point.
Huh? Say again?
I was 15.
Oh, 15.
Yes.
And well, I'm gonna throw this question out. I said it earlier, but I wanna you said Cornell or Sundance, right? Sundance.
Well, his legal name was Cornell Reed. His name in the gang at that time was Sundance.
Had you ever, from 15 on, well, I think we know the answer, and now looking back, you know the answer, but when you were 15, or when did you realize that his artistry and his skills as a photographer, you were able to match it or kind of create your own style and vision, been inspired by him?
That's a good question, because really 1980, when I came home from the Army, that's when I realized that that's the vision I have. That's what I want to do. Matter of fact, let me go back, let me rewind. When I first picked up the camera, I wanted to mirror what he had. So I shot my classmates in a similar way.
Okay.
You know, so when I look at those early photographs, it's done very much like what he shot. It was just basic. There was nothing powerful. They were pretty much snapshots, well-composed snapshots of my peers in front of the school against the brick wall. That was my guide. What he had in his photo albums back then, I wanted to mirror. The quality wasn't as good because I had a Kodak Instamatic camera, so it's not like it was a great quality. But nevertheless, it was a similarity there to a degree. We didn't dress on a manner like that because these brothers were older. I would say they were getting money out there, so their level of dress was on a whole nother level. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, I saw the importance of image making and documenting my peers. It wasn't until things started to change in the 1980s, the early 1980s, I went hard with that idea of capturing what Cornell did, because now I have a more advanced camera, and the styles of that time were more vibrant. You know, style was everything in the 1980s, even though in the 70s it was on that level. But it's something about me returning to North America after being stationed in Germany, that it was something about the 80s that the style and culture started to like really explode. People were more fashionable, you know what I mean? They took greater pride in the clothes in which they was wearing. So at that point, I realized that I want to further mirror what Cornell did by going out there and documenting young culture, but on another level right now. You know what I mean? It was beyond just capturing the photograph. It was more of using the camera as a compass to lead me to certain places so I could speak to a lot of young people about what was going on in the street. You know what I mean? Because we were killing each other. You know, when I came home from the Army, a lot of brothers were getting murdered in the street. I was getting word in Germany that a lot of photo people were dying. So I'm coming home with a mission. It's beyond the photographs now. It's about speaking to people. But that's not me.
You?
No, that's not me.
Oh.
I don't know why people thought that's me, but it's not. It's just a young brother that was out there that I saw one time with an advanced camera. and I took his photograph, and I would never see him again because he had a much better camera than me. So I was always wondering, what was he documenting? What did he do at that point? But I would never see him again. And it is my hope to find him one day, you know, and hopefully he used that camera to document the world around him, because for that young age, that was an advanced camera. I don't remember his name and nothing about him. No one has ever mentioned him before. There's a good chance he may not even be around.
Have people asked you if that's you?
Oftentimes, you know, I don't know why, but that's a question that has been always presented to me.
I know. Well, on social media, on Instagram, someone who shares that photo, I'm not sure who it is. They're certain it's you.
I get that all the time.
I linked you. I was like, is this you?
It's not.
It kind of sort of makes sense. No, but yeah. But you don't take a lot of photos of yourself, right?
It's not about me. You know, you see me in my work. If you study the subjects in which I photograph, I'm in every photograph, especially the portraits. You know, if you look deep into the eyes of my subjects, you see me. You know, there's a connection. It's not about me. It's about preserving the history. You know what I mean? So I exist through the photographs in which I capture. And
talk a little bit more about your that process, about how you engage. Let me ask you before that question. When did you start to transition from photographing your friends and your peers to actually going out and just documenting the streets and meeting people and getting to know them? And
that transpired when I came back to this country, and I had my camera now. I had a good camera, and I was living with my father, and you know, my father is a professional photographer. So once he saw me with my camera, he realized that I'm serious now, that, you know, I need to teach my son. I have something in common with my son. So at that point, he put me under the wing, and he started teaching me. You know, one of the first things he gave me was he directed me to his library again, and it was a time-lapse series on photography, on how to develop composition, light, subject matter, themes. He told me to read that. So I went on to read, you know, that whole series, and it helped to give me a better understanding of how this thing works. And then an enemy who became a friend gave me an enlarger. You know, when I came home, I saw him. He saw me with my camera. He was an aspiring photographer at that time. And we had conflict early on when I was coming up. I didn't really care for him, and he didn't care for me. But now I'm home from the Army, and we crossed paths with each other, and we started to build, and we reconciled. And he says, I have something for you. And I went to his home, and he gave me an enlarger. Wow. And a mega enlarger. And when I came home with that, my father said, okay, he's really serious about this here. We set up the enlarger in the family laundry room, which was ideal for it because we had running water. It was a perfect space. My father hooked me up with it, and he taught me how to develop.
That was your dark room?
I started to really get into it. I have my own dark room right now. And then my father put me on assignments. And the first assignment that he gave me was to photograph our apartment, photograph my room. Huh. And then I did that. Then he would evaluate that. He would critique the work. He would help me to understand light and composition. And then the second assignment he put me on, he wanted me to photograph the neighborhood. And I didn't find that to be interesting, but I did it nevertheless. I'm glad I did, because that body work is so important. You know, no people, just the landscape, the cars, the establishments, the streets, all that. Phenomenal body of work. And I'm 20 years old right now. So I did that, and I appreciated it, but I was drawn towards people. I want to go back to the vision I had that I first saw with the work that Cornell had produced. It was something about that, in addition to the fact that I wanted to have conversations. So I went up to my local high school at that time, Samuel J. Tillman, plenty of subject matter. A lot of the brothers and sisters that went there, they were actually the younger brothers and sisters to my peers. So I knew a lot of them. So I'm home from the military. I don't have a job, so I have a lot of time on my hands. So, and it was walking distance. So I would go there almost every morning, you know, during the school day, and I would engage a lot of the young people. I would introduce, well, they knew me already, but I would start to photograph them. I would build with them. I would speak to them about the importance of education and being focused. That's what it was really about. Because again, I came home to a time in which a lot of young men were being murdered at the hands of other young men. And I came home with a deep consciousness now. I went in the Army at 17, I returned at 20, but I returned a very changed man.
What year was
I
that?
involved in the Black Arts Movement. I studied about the power of the Black Arts Movement over there. And I came home wanting to make a difference within my community and lend my voice to try to end the violence and try, you know, and with my attempt to try to put young people on the right path. I didn't want them to really end up like me, because when my parents divorced, I went astray. And so I wanted the very best for them. So I went back to my school, the school I didn't graduate from, and I used that as my base to just talk to a lot of young people. And they took to me. And I was able to photograph them. And back in those days, I would go to my dark room and develop the photographs and bring them back up to the school and give them to them. Or I would take them to a 1-hour photo lab, get them processed and give them the photographs, keep a copy for myself and give them one. And it allowed me to build a bridge with a lot of these young people. They allowed, we started to just build. And I became like an older brother to a lot of them. And then when school ended, I would go to, during the afternoon, I would go to another high school, Erasmus, which was about maybe a mile away. And I would do the same thing. And in that process, I met a lot of young people who became my friends. And when not taking photographs, or they would accompany me to the park. I would take the sisters to the local park. We had Prospect Park. And I would introduce them to diet. And I would get bananas and mangoes and orange juice, and we'd get cups. And we would sit in the park and we would build about relationships and the importance of education. They became very much my little sisters and my first models. And these are just young sisters I just met. There was no interest in developing a relationship with them. All I wanted to do was build with them and help navigate them to get past life without getting pregnant, without falling a victim, to the streets. And it's so amazing that I have relationships with a lot of them to this very day. And that's what it was about for me. The camera guided me to these precious souls with their desire to try to aid them. So that's pretty much the foundation of what I did. And then I would bring the photographs home to my father and show him. And he would help me to develop my eye. He wasn't really impressed with the snapshots. He wanted to see more documentary work. So now I would go out there, I would do documentary work. He taught me light and speed. So he wanted to see images that really spoke. And that's when I was able to create some of my most iconic photographs, like the kids flipping on the mattress and the man swinging the dog. That's a direct result of my father's teaching. Huh. But then I wanted to document some of the social conditions in which I was seeing as well that were very close to my heart. And having read the autobiography of Malcolm X, I was very interested in some of the things that Malcolm saw, coming of age in the nation. And I remember him being a pimp. So in my neighborhood, there was an area that there was a lot of prostitution going on. So I would go out there with some of my partners with the desire to not only document that culture, but more importantly, to try to pull women away from it. So that was one of my first early assignments, to document prostitutes and have conversations with them. I remember bringing my tape recorder out there because I was really gravitating towards photojournalism. So I would go out there with my tape recorder and I would have conversations with them. And it was met in a very warm way, to my surprise. A lot of the sisters engaged me in conversation. They allowed me to photograph them early on, so I would do that. Then I was concerned with homelessness, because back in the days, it was a serious problem, very much like what we are seeing today, where you had a lot of homeless people sleeping in the trains. And I saw a lot of people that fell victim to alcoholism. I started to document that. So my eye started to move in different directions. There was no one particular way I went. There was a cross between documentary photography and portrait photography. Within a roll of film, you'll see a little bit of everything going on. I would bring it home to my father. And it meant a lot to me at that point. Again, he wasn't too thrilled with the portrait photography. He thought it was all right. And I get it now, because it was in fact snapshots, but nevertheless, it all represented seconds of my life and pieces of a larger puzzle. These people were very important to me, and I would, as I look at my life now, it's an even balance of my work. There's fine art, there's fashion, there's documentary, there's street photography, and all that is pretty much due to my father. So that's like the early stages. And then one of the gifts that my father told me that really stayed with me and really helped me to stay the course and remain steadfast, he said, carry your camera everywhere you go. Have it out, have it set, ready to go, because you never know when you're going to see that decisive moment. So from that point, in the 1980s to this very day, I've always carried my camera everywhere I've gone. And that has been very instrumental in me capturing some of the photographs that I have.
Now, have you, any of these subjects from when you were growing up or when you came back, have you encountered them again and documented them again and so forth?
Always, always. The beautiful thing about it was friendships were established. You know, once I started on, it was about that, you know, gaining friendships in all walks of life. So it just wasn't about getting the picture and keeping it moving. It was about building a bridge with these young people. And that's what I did. The photography became the language that allowed me to engage them in conversation. The camera was a compass that led me to them. My objective was not just about getting the photograph. I wanted to build with them. Because again, there was a lot of killing going on. At the same time, there was a dark cloud on the horizon. Something was happening in America, and I could not place what it was. And as time would progress, it was the AIDS epidemic and the crack epidemic. And I realize now that I have to use my platform, my voice, to try to save as many young people as I could, including myself, because these epidemics hit hard. And also, Ronald Reagan became president, and he talked about a war on drugs. And we knew at that time that he had held on to very conservative views and how it was going to impact the Black community. So we knew that social programs would be cut, and we were going to be faced with some very difficult times. So, you know, here I am, a photographer. I'm constantly in search of knowledge, and I'm going to different events that are centered on consciousness. You know, we had an organization called the East. You know, Uru Sassi gave events. It was there that I saw the Last Poets. It was there that I saw the group Still Post and Sonia Sanchez. And I would go there often, and it further enhanced my knowledge of self.
Where was this?
It was in Brooklyn. It was in the Bed-Stuy section of Brooklyn back then, early on. Because I had learned about the Black arts movement when I was in the Army. So when I came home with the desire to find it. Where's this place at? And I was fortunate to find it. And it was all there. Because I developed a love for poetry in the Army. I developed a love for the drum and African dance, and it was all there. There's a very important institution that's no longer there. And that's where I got some of my most dynamic photographs too, of the Last Poets and Sonia Sanchez and so many other individuals that were very prominent during that day and time, Amiri Baraka and others.
I was named after Amiri Baraka.
Wow, that's beautiful, brother. Okay.
I met his another Spike Lee son, another son of Brooklyn, Spike Lee. They had not a feud, but Amiri Baraka was not happy with Spike Lee for the Malcolm X movie, right? And so as a young film student, I sided with Spike Lee, not having met Amiri Baraka. But then through the time I met his children, including Ross Baraka, who's at Howard, who's not a mayor, and one of the mayors of in New Jersey, I think Newark, right? And then I got to meet Amiri Baraka at Brown University. He spoke. And I think at that time, they had reconciled. And that was after Malcolm X movie came out. And so now I had actually a 360 appreciation of Amiri Baraka and his contributions to the world, and particularly with his children. So it was very deep, and I was like, okay, so I'm gonna embrace this blessing. That's my name. But I also knew the Swahili version of my name as well, meaning one responsible. So I embraced that name. But meeting Sonia Sanchez too. I think life and world and culture goes in cycles, right? And so being in college, meeting forefathers and pioneers and inventors and creators like you and like Sonia Sanchez and Amiri Baraka and so forth, we continue the work, Speaking of which, in your transitioning, as you expanded outside of New York, when did you decide, and what was the first city when you said, let me go beyond Brooklyn, let me go beyond New York? Where did you go next?
The first city I went to was Newark, New Jersey, because Newark had a very rich history from the 1960s, different situations that went down, the rebellion, a lot of Black establishments. It just had a really rich cultural history, and I wanted to explore that. I had never been to Newark before, so I would go out there. I would take the PATH train and just go and explore. I remember going to Broad and Market Street, and which is like the major shopping district of that particular area. And I asked some of the people, where's the high school at? Where's the local high school? And I wanted to go there. And they directed me to the Jamel Shabazz High School, where I would start to go.
Oh.
And just like how I would document young people in Brooklyn, I started to document people in Newark, and they welcomed me. I was from New York. I had my portfolio with me, and I was able to photograph them just like I photographed young people in Brooklyn. I developed a lot of really wonderful friendships with a lot of the brothers. They brought me into the neighborhood. They had projects at that time, and I was able to connect with them to the point where I developed friendships that I'm still connected with a lot of those young people to this very day. Jamel Shabazz was one of them, matter of fact.
Okay. Wow.
That was a really powerful experience. So that was the first stop, and I would spend a lot of time in that particular city. I had a friend that I was in the Army with who was in Jersey City. I would go there. During my time in the Army, I met a lot of really dynamic brothers from Philadelphia. So I would venture to Philly, in hopes of finding them. And then I'll make it down to Baltimore, DC, and Virginia. So I started traveling early on because I just wanted to go where the young people were at. And I wanted to find different terrain because I had done a lot in New York already. And I just wanted to expand myself and just gain more knowledge of self and just meet more people. I was on the path now. Again, the camera was my compass that was just leading me, to go to different places. So as long as I had money in my pocket and connections in different cities, I would go. Because in most cities, I always knew somebody. So I would just go and oftentimes stay with them and just explore those cities. So I started with, just pretty much 95 South, just going, from north to the south, that whole region, stopping in the big cities.
Now, you said something interesting. Well, you've been saying a ton of dropping a lot of jewels and a lot of interest in your story, your narrative. One of the things I was curious about, you said you had money in your pocket, and you've become notorious or famous or and popular as the public has embraced your iconic photography. How were you able to maintain and live and what was your job? What besides photography, what was your work? Like, how do you make money?
I stepped into a career in '83, and I decided that, one of the things my father told me when I came home from the Army was, get a good city job. At that point I was going to school. He says, but to have stability, at least get a city job to have a cornerstone, for your foundation. And then from there, you have a career, you have benefits. So he says, apply for every city position that you qualify for, which I did, and it so happens I did the post office, I did transit, I did the correction department, and corrections and the post office called me at the same time. So I decided that I would be a correction officer. That's the path I need to go on because there's a lot of people incarcerated. A lot of my associates had fallen victims to the system. Some were forcibly incarcerated. So I decided that's the place that I need to be. So in 1983, I became a correction officer the same year that crack hit.
Wow.
And that was my career. So that allowed me to do two things. It allowed me to survive with a foundation, a financial foundation, but just as important, it put me in a position to be inside the jails and perform my duty, try to save as many young people as I could.
And when did you retire?
I retired 17 years ago. So I did 20 years.
Wow. The one thing I wish, I was wondering I wish Zoom would tell me the time as far as how much I have left in the Zoom meeting, because with personal Zoom, not business Zoom, there's a time limit.
Understood.
But so at some point it may cut off or alarm me that's going to cut off. Would you mind if we do a round two?
Sure.
Maybe shorter?
No
Okay.
problem. It'd be my pleasure.
So when it lets me know, I'll let you know.
All right.
But this is so yeah. No, the reason why I had asked that, I mean, some people who really have gotten interested in you, have found that out about you, how you've been able to manage your passion and your vision, but also work. And you've done photography inside the prisons, right?
I worked in a jail, so there is a distinction between two.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in a facility where people were pre-trial detainees. They weren't convicted. They were all pretty much awaiting trial. Prison is when you've actually been convicted.
Okay.
So I worked in a jail, and yes, I documented every aspect of my journey.
Wow.
You know, again, I carried a camera everywhere I went. So from the moment I was called for the job, the investigation, the physical, the academy, the jail itself, everywhere I worked, I carried my camera and I documented that experience. It became a part of a visual diary. I felt it was very important to record it. So I documented the ins and outs. And it wasn't authorized, but it's something I had to do. One of the things I did extensively, I photographed my co-workers. I photographed my supervisors. No one was doing that. So despite the fact that it wasn't authorized, I photographed everybody and they appreciated that. And no one
I was
really
just about to ask you that.
It wasn't like I carried an open camera into where I worked at, but in the locker room area, I just did it. And no one was doing it at that time. So, I never met any opposition whatsoever during my whole 20 years on the job.
Wow. So you had talked about you traveled, and for the audience who is going to watch this, who don't know our sort of 6 degree of separation, our connection, or that we have a connection. I happened to be in college between 1989 and 1993. And I think you said 1992 you visited DC and happened to visit my community, my family, and documented them. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in DC, even early on, in the early 80s. I had a good partner that was in the Marine Corps. He was stationed in Quantico. So I would often go visit him. And on his days off, we would go down to DC, and we went down there with the desire to try to engage young people. We want to find anywhere young people were at, I want to be. And Malik shared the same vision as I did. So as time went on, somehow we connected with a lot of youth in you said the Southeast area, I believe. We just happened to, be around Howard University, and we saw all these young people, and we started building with them. We got out the car and we introduced ourselves, and they respected us as older brothers out in New York. We were brothers that had knowledge of self, and they respected that, and we had a genuine love for them. There was so many young brothers, and they represented our future. Mind you now, this is a time when the crack epidemic had hit, and that dark cloud that was in New York is traveling throughout America right now. We're losing a lot of young people to crack. So here we have an abundance of young people who have good hearts. They have this potential, this greatness. And we felt good behind that because they hadn't been corrupted. And our desire was trying to guide them to the very best of our ability. And I remember that day, somehow we might have, met them initially, went back to Virginia, and we decided to come back on this day to have like a rally with them. And just so many of them came out, and all these beautiful, vibrant young brothers that had pure hearts. And we would build with them about the importance of the future, the importance of education, the importance of eating the right foods and really having a plan in life. And it was a very special moment because we were in a race to save them from the drug dealers. Because what was happening, a lot of brothers from New York in particular saw the southern states as prime real estate to set up shop in terms of the drug trade. And they were doing it, and it was a race against time. We were trying to save them from that because we knew that a lot of those brothers from New York, that they would leave an impression on them because they had a smoothness with them, but they had other motives, and we were concerned with that. So again, it was a race against time. So our thing was to try to save as many of these young people as I can get. I remember a few of them. I remember Ad, I remember Japreen, Lloyd Rael, and they were just good brothers, and they had leadership abilities, and we felt that if we could build with them, hopefully they could uphold the torchlight and save these young people and guide them on the right path. So, you know, I remember that day I photographed them. I got this incredible image that I took back then that, you know, I'm looking to have in my next book because it's a very important part of my journey. And I like to know how some of them are doing. You know, I would go to find out that Lord, I believe, died in a car accident, you
Yes,
know,
yes,
many
yeah,
years
he
after the
has.
photograph was taken. And I'm just really curious in how some of those other brothers is doing. But, you know, our thing was to impart the knowledge to them and help them to understand they have a duty and responsibility to save the community. You know, that we got to be mindful of drugs and alcoholism and poor diet and how it's killing a lot of young people. At the same time, the war of drugs is going on and a lot of social programs have been cut. So a lot of these young people, they were at risk of being lost to the system. And we didn't want them to fall victim to it. Because again, me and Malik, you know, we use the military as a cornerstone to help us get ourselves established at 17 years old. So we just didn't want those brothers to fall victim. We wanted to try to guide them. And we just felt they were just innocent. They was just good kids. Just needed guidance from older brothers.
Well, interesting enough, 1992, 93, we saw a lot of gods who were in the military come into the cipher, and you know, in that they would meet brothers in the community, and they would be invited into our cipher, and they're all doing well. So I guarantee you, the ones you mentioned and other brothers like Bart King, Jamel, they're going to see this, and I'm sure they're going to comment and share an appreciation for this discussion we're having. And also they'll comment on, particularly, they might even snapshot this particular section that we're talking about.
Mm.
The RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan was doing this, you know, the verses, the sort of music competition, friendly competition.
Right. Yeah. Indeed.
So RZA was talking about, you know, kind of being nostalgic and talking about the past and his history, his music history and his culture history. And he talked about going to DC. He talked about meeting Father Lord.
Mm.
And so somehow some of my brothers were able to capture that, like that video, that segment,
good,
and post it, because we met them as well. We met the RZA Wu-Tang Clan when they came to DC and performed, and so those two brothers, Father Lord and RZA, would build and talk. But a lot of the brothers who were in that cipher are continuing doing the work, especially in DC. So definitely the seeds that you planted have grown and continue to grow.
Well, that's good. That warms my heart to know, because, you know, we've lost a lot of young people over the many years. A lot fell by the wayside. Some fell to mass incarceration. Others fell to addiction. So it's always a good thing to know that brothers have survived and they're continuing to be leaders today. You know, and I would assume that the brothers are probably like in their 40s right now.
Yeah.
Voices need to be heard, and we need all hands on deck right now. So
Definitely.
they have remained steadfast over these many years, and they have contributed to the elevation of the community. That's a good thing.
Definitely. Can you mentioned, and for lack of a better word, the plug. You had mentioned like Newark, and I was wondering, like, for the audience, especially for those who are inquiring, I have to get one of your books. I have to purchase one of your books, and I look forward to the second round of part 2 that we do. Want to get into your future projects, and without proverbially letting the cat out of the bag, I want you to share what you're working on. But going back to your books, in your books that you've had published, are there when I say are there themes, is like when you were in Newark or in New Jersey, is that in a particular book? When you're in Philly, is that in a particular book? Or how do you sort of put together your books and organize your books? Is like time periods, or?
A lot of my books is rooted in time. You know, you have Back in the Days, you have A Time of Crack, you have Seconds of My Life, you have the last Sunday in June. Time is the common piece of all of my books. You know, they're designed to really provoke thought. With my new book is very important because it's called The Book of Life. And it's going to be a very comprehensive book about my journey, going back into 75 to the current. And the key is really the editing process. What am I going to edit? What stories am I trying to tell? So I'm looking to try to pull images that have a narrative, that speak. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to really have that go. So that's the key, to create an idea of the book of life, and now fill in the pages of that book with stories that are very, very telling. So it's going to be really, really full. You know, it's going to deal with a part of my journey that I've shown before, but unlike my other books where there wasn't any really writing on my behalf, I have to write. I have to include journal entries to help people understand what this journey was about. So it'll be prostitution, it'll be homelessness, it'll be the Nation of Islam, it'll be the Nation Gods of Earth, it'll be images from the East organization with Sonia Sanchez and Last Poets, a little bit of everything. You know, a lot of photographs of people who return to the essence, because I want to highlight them, their legacy, and let them know that their life wasn't for granted, that I was able to keep them alive despite them physically being gone. So there's going to be a lot in it. It's just going to be full. You know, hopefully it will be like volumes, you know, sitting on time, like there'd be the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. It might be a black and white book. It might be books called on couples. It's hard to say right now because it gets in its developmental stages. The books are going to consist of really my photo albums. I want to make this book like you're looking at photo albums, unlike my previous books where some might say it feels like a high school yearbook. With this particular book, I'm looking to do actual photographs. When you open it up, and there will be pages that you can just see, like a classic photo album, like I could just share with you right here. And these are just excerpts of it right here. There's a lot of just pages that are missing because I'm taking pictures out just to help story. But I hope to have it like this, where there's just albums, pages after pages, but albums with different themes in it, where you can really get a feeling of what's going on. So that's what's going to make this book really unique. I'm looking forward to it, you know, hopefully to drop next year. It's a very important book. It's beyond photographs. What it is a book of life. And I wanted to give life. I want to serve as a form of visual medicine to help you feel good. You know, with everything that's going on today, as even back in the days, a lot of people have died, both through violence, through the coronavirus, and through health conditions. So many people I photograph are no longer here.
Right.
So my objective is to use this book as a form of medicine to help heal people, to help people come to terms with things they might have done, because I have photographs of people who've been murdered by the viewer. So you might be going through my book and come upon a photograph of a person who you took out of here. You might, as a drug dealer, come upon a photograph of a young woman that you introduced to crack cocaine, and she was never the same. You might come upon a photograph of yourself, you know, when you were out there wilding, and now you went on to be a professor at a prominent university. So there's a lot of backstories with my photographs. A lot of young people today are looking to my photographs to find more about their loved ones who are no longer here. A lot of young brothers are writing me and looking at my Instagram page because they're looking for their fathers, and they found them on there. There's young women who are writing me and saying, do you have a picture of my mother? She died back in the 80s. You know, so it's very interesting what's happening with me in regards to my work. And I feel that the work doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the people. So that's why I'm so determined to produce these books, to get them out in the universe so they can have them now and have a record of how life was before. So, you know, I'm very grateful that I've been given the ability to see. And with this divine gift, I just want to contribute to the preservation of history and culture, so these books now could be placed in libraries. I was greatly inspired by a movie, The Book of Eli, starring Denzel Washington.
We talked about
and that movie gave me a sense of understanding my high calling in life, that I've been put on this path for these past 45 years to document life around me. That was my mission. That was my assignment. And I had to go through different trials and tribulations and obstacles to get to where I'm at right now. And now I have reached this particular point in my life, this crossroads. And now what I've gained now can come out and be placed in the form of a book. And if I transition, the book has been secured. So that's how I look at my life and my mission right now. It's bigger than me. It's just about making sure that this history and culture is preserved, especially in this day and time when so many people are dying prematurely due to this coronavirus and everything in between. You know, this is my life's mission right now. Everything I have is for the people. All the work that I've accumulated is for institutions, both museums and institutions of higher learning. I have amassed so many treasures on my journey. You know, I had to just make sure now that this work is preserved. So I'm happy that my work is in the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., the Gordon Parks Foundation, the Minnesota Museum of American Art. You know, so my work is scattered around, you know, and I feel good that it's there. So it outlived me.
Jamel Shabazz, it's almost full circle. Well, it's almost full circle because you're continuing. The black and white book that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yes.
So it sounds like the Book of Life is going to be similar to that in a sense.
It's a continuation of that journey. It's a continuation of that particular book. It's the continuation of what James Van Der Zee did, what Gordon Parks did. You know, it goes on.
Right.
James Van Der Zee, you know, he photographed the Harlem Renaissance. Gordon Parks did the 1950s on into the 1990s. Leonard Freed did the 1960s, even the 1950s and 60s and 70s. So I'm just continuing that journey right now to do my part as a visual artist to contribute to the preservation of our history and culture. So it's just a continuation. Leonard Freed's book, Black and White America, was the roadmap that put me on this particular path here. So I'm just trying to not only, you know, continue on this path, but at the same time serve as a pathfinder for future visionaries. So now they have an example they could follow. Just like I was inspired by Cornell, you know, Sundance, perhaps young people will be inspired by my work and say, because of this particular book, A Time Before Crack, I want to be a photographer.
So it's continuing to record. So I have just 3 more questions really, and some comments, some statements. One, you had mentioned new photographers, and because there's not a lot of photos of yourself. What would you say of the photos of you? And there's a reason why I'm asking. Which photographer and which photo do you like the most of yourself? It sort of represents that you like that. That's a good one. I like that one.
That's a really great question. One of the greatest photographs that was ever taken of me was taken by my wife, my queen. And there was a young man I was mentoring that my daughter brought home from college that was wounded at 17. And he was seeking guidance and direction. And she met him in college, and his father was incarcerated, and he was dealing with a very difficult time in his life. So she met him in college, and she brought him home to me. And she said, before she brought him home, she told me about him. She told me about the hardships that he had coming of age, and that she saw greatness within him, and she felt that I could save him. So when she brought him to me, you know, he was at a crossroads in his life. He was in a very delicate situation that he was, he could have faced incarceration. And I had to make a very difficult choice to save him. It was one of the most difficult choices in my life at the time when he came to me. And I could not have him fall victim to the system. So I told him that I think it's best that he goes into the military. So I encouraged him to go into the Air Force and get a really good job that can allow him to get away, learn a trade. And unfortunately, the Air Force didn't take him. The only branch that took him was the Army. So I helped him to get a good job, a clerical position. I inspired him to go into the reserves. And I said, I will go with you every step of the way. Me and my wife will go with you every step of the way with this journey. We will write you. We will go to your graduation. We will encourage you. So he enlisted. He got a good job. He went away to Oklahoma, Fort Sill for basic training. I wrote him to encourage him. And then my wife and I, we went to Oklahoma for his graduation. And after his graduation, we came upon this mountain called Medicine Mountain, and we took him there to build him in his uniform. And what was so profound about this experience was we sat on this mountain overlooking a valley, and down the valley there was a pathway. And my wife captured a photograph of me sitting on one side, and he's facing me as he's looking towards the path. And that was going to be one of the most important photographs of me and him, in addition to others that she took of me, teaching him how to tie a tie, teach him how to play chess, and everything I had, I tried to pass on. She documented that whole experience. He came here for many years, and he sat on this one green couch, and we just gave him guidance and direction. Eventually, he would get called to go to war. He went to Afghanistan. Luckily, he did his time over there. He survived. He came home a mature man. Upon him coming home, I encouraged him to get a city job. My wife and I encouraged him to get property, and the brother got a really solid city job where he has a career now. He's a homeowner and he has a wife, and he has become my son. So I go back to that photograph. I would say it's one of the most important photographs of mine, because I was faced with a very difficult choice, you know, to have a young man go in the military during the time of war, a very difficult choice. But I knew that he wouldn't make it in the street. And I felt that he needed to get away and grow up like I did. And it was a gamble that I made, but it worked. So I'll share that photograph with you perhaps later on in the day. It's a very powerful one. I'm glad that she caught it. And to me, that's symbolic to who I am, you know, just trying to be a guide. And I'm on the path myself, because despite the fact that I put him on that path, I'm on the path with him. And he has enriched my life and the life of my family.
Wow, you are an amazing storyteller.
I strive to be, you know. I just feel that I'm just thankful that I'm here, that I've been given the ability to see and use my voice. So I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, because you just painted a picture. Like I'm like, I almost don't need to see the photo, but I'm super curious to want to see the photo at the same time. But like, you told the whole story behind that photo, you know, or her documentation of that experience.
I could actually show it to you. Let me just fire the camera.
The story, the journey.
Question, I could share it with you and give you a glimpse of it, so you could better understand the magnitude of it.
Okay.
I just need a minute here. Let me just turn my phone back on.
Okay. Well, while you looking, I'm gonna ask you another question, and you can, as you look, you can think about the question. If you don't mind, I'm curious to know, you had, and you can give me details, but I know that because in your Instagram feed, you did some work with Godfather of Harlem. I'm curious to know what you think about that. Did you see the series? And because I have some comments and some questions about that, because it's just, your photos are pretty amazing, but also I enjoyed the series. So I want to know your opinion and your take. And that
all right, here's the photograph here. First, let me see if you can see a little bit. This is the image.
Oh wow! And that's on the mountain.
Yes, Medicine Mountain.
Okay. That's you on the right.
Say again.
That's you on the right.
Yes. Now, in reference to the Godfather of Harlem, I'm very honored that one of the creator of it, you know, my brother Marquand Smith, who has a great respect for my work, reached out to me, and he invited me to participate on set and create the advertisement for the movie. I was astonished with that invitation. Of course, you know, it was a period movie that was set in 1965, so it allowed me as a photographer to experience that time period. And some of the people in which I was to photograph would be the Malcolm X character, the Adam Clayton Powell character, Bumpy Johnson, and the leader of the mob, Gennady. And that was incredible, you know, because, you know, it's this period movie, the cars, the whole feel of the set was the 1960s. And I remember Gordon Parks had photographed Malcolm X so well. And now I have an opportunity to photograph Brother Nigel, you know, as Michael X, and I think he played a hell of a role. I mean, he looked like him and everything. I was placed in that position to document him, and I tried to do it with dignity. You know, one of the things I told the creators of the movie was I didn't want guns, you know, because I didn't want to create a campaign in our community that young people are seeing the Bumpy Johnson character with guns. They had an early campaign where they had Forrest Whitaker with a white suit, drenched in blood with a gun in his hand. I said, that's one of the things I won't do. I have no guns. So I came up with the idea to incorporate a chessboard, which is the chessboard behind me. I came with an idea because Bumpy Johnson was known as a grandmaster chess player. So I wanted to show him as a strategist, as a thinker. Right. So those photographs you see of him playing chess, that was my vision. Even the idea of the Malcolm character and Bumpy playing chess in the diner, I created that idea. I wanted to show thinking men. You know, so it was an honor to work on it. You know, I really appreciate that. And the storyline was very interesting because at first I declined. You know, I didn't want to participate in any movies that will glorify a life that could be harmful to young people. We didn't need that. We had enough of that. So when I was first told about it, I said, I can't do that. And then one of my partners told me that it's not going to be like that. Trust me, it's not going to be that way. So I agreed, and I did it. And it was very interesting working on set because it gave me an understanding on how to work on a set, how it operates. And I was very grateful for that. And I created one of the most important bodies of work that I've ever done, aside from what I did in the 1980s. So the storyline is very interesting. It helps us to better understand the heroin epidemic at a very interesting time. You know, you have the war in Vietnam going on, and you have these organized crime families that are bringing heroin into our community and destroying the lives of so many individuals over greed. And it helped me to get a feeling, a sense of what that was like, in addition to the role that the Nation of Islam had at that time of cleaning up community. You know, they were one of the few organizations that were able to take drug dealers and drug addicts and convert them, you know, transform their lives. So I appreciate the fact that series highlighted that. Right, it's very important to know. You know, there was this race against time. Here in one end, you have an organized crime family bringing drugs in the community. You have another organization trying to combat that. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't stay on set for a long time. It was actually maybe just 2 days I had to do what I did. So it's not like I was there doing an entire set. I was just put in for that one reason to create the ad campaigns, and that was pretty much it. But I watched it and I found it to be very interesting. It's fiction, you know, so a lot of it is not true, and they make that very clear in the beginning that this is not a nonfiction. You know, a lot of it is not correct. So there's things in which I was conflicted with, you know, certain things that weren't really correct in terms of the feeling, in terms of how the nation was portrayed. It could have been done a lot better. But nevertheless, it's a very interesting historic movie that sheds light on, if anything, the heroin epidemic and how it impacted Harlem and disrupted the lives of so many people. So before we had a coronavirus and a crack epidemic and the AIDS epidemic, we had a major heroin epidemic. Right. So it gave light on how that came about.
I also aesthetically, looking at your Instagram feed and that section you had from that series, also aesthetically, I liked how you know, when the crowd, the extras and the fashion and the styles of that time period, how you're able to kind of like use your style, but to get them together into groups.
Good question.
Just convey that story, that narrative of that time period, but in vivid color, right? Yes. Like, which is, it's like kind of like a contradiction from that time period, and then the camera technology, but also sort of up to date with nowadays. And so see those that contrast was really cool.
I appreciate that. And what was good about the extras for me was having the opportunity to make them feel extra special, because that wasn't my assignment to photograph them. My assignment was to photograph the main people, the main characters. Right. For me, I want everyone to feel special. So as I was on set and I'm looking at the extras just there, I said, let me gather up these brothers and sisters and photograph them to make them feel noticeable. Let them know that I see you. You might be considered extra. You got a small part in the movie, but to me, you're somebody important, and I want to freeze time because who knows who you're going to be later on in life. So I gathered a lot of them up and made them feel good. They were dressed for the occasion. The vibration was out there. I was able to use the space, the limited space I had to photograph them and make them feel special, to pose them up and everything. Having studied so many photograph books from back in that era, I knew how things were supposed to look. And going back to Leonard Freed's book, Leonard Freed's book was pretty much that same time period. So I already knew how to create that situation, which I did. And more importantly, I made them feel special. They became a part of the conversation. And that
another full circle.
Yeah, it came full circle. So I try to give love to everybody. You know, man, I'm not one that's just driven behind the so-called stars. In my eyes, everyone is a star. You know, from the person, the big Hollywood Academy Award-winning individual, to the person whose first day's on set. You special to me, and I want to recognize that. So that it was an honor to work on that. And hopefully, you know, the opportunity will come again, because it was a lot of hard work. It was challenging. It was the first time I've ever done that before. It was a lot of pressure on me to create, but I'm very grateful for the team, the A team that I had established to accompany behind it, because a lot of what I do is rooted in people who've helped me. I mean, I have to take a moment and shout out all the visionaries who came before me, who laid the ground for what I stand on right now. I wouldn't be where I'm at now if it wasn't for them. And there's so many individuals. You know, I got to speak about the great scholar Deborah Willis that created a platform for me. Danny Simmons, you know, who created the Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation, who gave me my first teaching assignment and allowed me to curate my show. There's an organization called Photoville that allowed me to curate a very important show last year called Perspectives, that allowed me to connect 14 photographers from different areas under the umbrella of one show called Perspectives, and to share different important voices that were relevant to the time, from albinism to police brutality to PTSD within veterans to everyday people. You know, so, you know, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of great people. This is not done by me. You know, it's so many people that aided me over the many years to be where I'm at right now. I give praise and thanks to my wife for being a cornerstone of my life and being there for me, you know, and having patience with me when I do what I do. So
how long have you all been together?
30 years.
Wow. Wow.
Completion.
That's awesome.
Understand the cipher, you know, and
Nice,
it's been
nice.
that. So I'm very grateful for her and everyone else. I'm grateful for you and so many other people that guided me along the path. It hasn't been an easy road, you know, but Powerhouse Books has been very instrumental. My man Ben A. Taschen in Germany, who has my new book out, the Richard Beaver's Gallery, you know, who's given me a series of shows. So a lot of people have helped me and had faith in me. The Makata Museum, Laurie Cumbo, so many great people I got to shout out that aided me. Today, one of my biggest inspirations is a young filmmaker by the name of Khalik Allah. You know, he produced a movie called I Walk on Water. Incredible filmmaker.
Yeah, thank you for sharing his contact. Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful brother. I mean, prior to connecting with you, I was watching his new video, his new documentary that he let me see, which is phenomenal. He is a brilliant filmmaker, but more than that, he's an incredible human being who has a compassionate heart, and he's duty bound to go against the grain, travel that road less travel, and speak to those who are suffering from mental illness, you know, those who have been discarded by society. He steps to them. So I definitely want to connect you with him so you can speak to him about his most current film, which really touched my heart because he's out there during the wee hours of the morning, engaging people that most people would be fearful of. And he's doing with no fear, but with a determination to live in accord with his duty to go out there and save as many souls as he can. So he's been one of my greatest inspirations today as a photographer.
Okay. Yeah, I thank you for that connection. I've already reached out.
Good.
As far as and we follow. I know I follow him on Instagram.
Good.
And I saw, he's doing some great work. It's amazing work.
Yeah, please reach out to that brother.
Okay.
He's next level. That's the only way to describe him. Next level. I'm so inspired by him. When I get off this conversation with you, I'm going back to watch this film again to just feed my soul and help to just reinvigorate my spirit in terms of to remind me what I need to do out there. And he's that example for me. You know, I'm really impressed the fact that he's like practically almost 30 years younger than me, but he's doing such important work and that I can draw an inspiration from.
Well, one last question and then some comments. And the comment is, I'm gonna definitely, besides thanking you, the comment is we'll kind of continue the conversation offline, because what I wanted to do is in once I'm gonna, in promoting this to the public, I want to get your permission on what photos to use and so forth, and to explore that with you.
Sure.
But my last question for you is, and I saw it on Instagram, you got an award via Gordon Parks Foundation, or
yes.
Can you tell us a little more about
that? I have to shout out brother Swiss Beats. He nominated me for that award.
Okay.
An award for being a documentary photographer. I received that back in 2018, one of the high points of my career. And it meant a lot to me to get that, because what it did to me, it became like a torchbearer. And the award is right behind me. You know, you see this photograph of Gordon Parks. To me, it came like it was like a torch that was passed on to me to continue in the legacy of Gordon Parks and what he's done. And one of the things that Gordon Parks was very concerned about was the future of Black youth. You know, and as he got older, he was very concerned. I remember his great niece had told me, Robin Hookman, who I have to give her props, because currently I have a show up with the work of Gordon Parks in Minnesota right now called A Choice of Weapons, Honor, and Dignity. And so that's going to be up until September. And
Say it again.
Say again.
That needs to be mentioned twice. Say it again.
The exhibition is currently up in Minnesota, St. Paul, the home of Gordon Parks, but he lived as a teenager and got his start, is at the Minnesota Museum of American Art. And the exhibition is called A Choice of Weapons, Honor and Dignity. It's an exhibition between his work and my work. What an honor. It's curated by Robin Hickman, his great niece, one of the most important exhibitions of my life. And so the award was given to me to continue in his legacy. And I normally don't receive awards. It's one of the few awards I've gotten for this craft. So I look at it again as a torchlight that I have to hold on to uphold his honor, and at the same time inspire the generation that's becoming behind me, and respond to his question of who's going to save the Black youth. You know, so I have taken on, you know, that responsibility, not only to save the Black youth, but to try to make my imprint in the larger world, because we are suffering as a society. And you know, I remember Harry Belafonte, you know, speaking about the role of the artist in this day and time, that we are in fact the gatekeepers. You know, it's the language of art. I'm going to always say it. The politicians and the religious leaders have failed. So now it's incumbent upon the conscious artists to lend their voice during these very critical times. And as a conscious artist, I have an obligation to give back in any way I can. So if it's about curating exhibitions or trying to inspire the next generation of conscious visionaries, I'm going to do all I can in the manner of Gordon Parks, and at the same time, do whatever I can to try to save a lot of these youth out here through my craft, through this visual language of photography.
Well, that's a perfect ending. That's an amazing perfect ending, and I'm surprised that it's still recording. Man, thank you so much.
Thank you, brother, for having the time, the interest in my work. That means a lot to me. It's always a pleasure to build, because, you know, this information, like I said, doesn't belong to me. Everything I do is for the people. You know, I'm just a vehicle.
And you definitely indirectly, definitely indirectly, you've taught me in photography, and I'm definitely inspired by you in my photography. And I occasionally do street portraits. I've done particularly in Harlem.
All right.
More than anywhere else, but I've also kind of another full circle. You had mentioned you started to do graffiti, and then you picked up the camera and stopped it. I've been documenting graffiti artists, and this is the first interview out of my sort of live feed during this pandemic, my live feed series. But you're the first one who's a photographer, right? And the art of photography. The other interviews have been with graffiti and street artists and muralists. But I found in the last couple of interviews I've done, I've been focusing on Black men, men of African diaspora, men of the original man, right? And I found that to be a sort of consistent theme and interest of mine, right? Yeah, so I really enjoy, and again, going back to Nation Gaza Herbs and 5% in DC, Divine C, who was part of my foundation. That's what drew me to you, to want to know more. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. It's truly been a blessing to build with you. On this wonderful day of the 25th. As we're about to close out the month and go into another month. We're halfway into the year. So it's a pleasure. And I'd just like to close by saying, and I always close with this here: the harvest is ripe, but the labors are few. There's a lot of work that has to be done out there, and we need it more now than ever before with this coronavirus.
Sure.
We're losing so many people, so this is a time to really come together as a people and love each other, respect each other, because I'm very concerned with the future. I'm very troubled with the things I'm seeing. In America, we reached over 100,000 dead due to this coronavirus, and it's constantly elevating. The Black and brown communities are getting hit the hardest nationwide and around the world. There's a mess right now. Brazil leads in America, and we see it just everywhere. You know, so we're living in some very troubling times. So
Definitely.
we need all hands on deck right now. We need all conscious people to come together and lend their voice to try to make this world a better place, because there's a lot of trouble going on. You know, when you think about the fabric of the family is being broken down now, because it's the elders who are dying at a higher rate, and now children being left without parents. So what's going to happen right now? Millions have lost their jobs already. You know, so again, we're living in very troubling times right now. And that's one of my biggest concerns right now. I've done all I can photographically. Now I'm just trying to do what I can to help heal people during these very difficult times. There's a lot of anxiety. People are pain right now. They've lost their loved ones, even loved ones who have fallen ill. They can't go see them in the hospital. If they do pass away, you cannot give a proper burial. So imagine the anxiety that people are feeling right now, in addition to uncertainty. So that's my greatest concern right now, in addition to the fact that we live in an election year. We have a president who has a disdain for people of color. He's creating policies that are making things very complicated. He has reinvigorated hatred in this country. You know, so a very, very sad time. So we need all hands on deck to come together as a people and try to use whatever platforms we can to make this world a better place. And that's what I live for. Salute, my brother. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but
no, I appreciate it.
Whatever I can do to help you, I'm here. Again, you got Khalik Allah, and I have a list of other people who I think could really share some good insight.
When you were talking about the 14 photographers, I think Adama Duffing was part of that.
Yes. And
I remember hearing about it. I didn't get to go, but I was very much intrigued by that group of photographers, including Adama was part of that. And that
I gotta say to my co-curator, I gotta shout her out, my girl Layla, Sister Layla Baran, you know, beautiful sister who's a co-curator with me. She's an incredible photographer. She's doing important work right now. I have nothing but love for that sister and what she's doing for the photography. She represents that new generation of torchbearers who have come center stage, in addition to some of the photographers who participated, you know, Michael McCoy, Michael Young, Soraya Reyes, Donato Di Camalo, deep guy, you gotta follow him. I mean, he comes from a really dark world, and he has changed his life around to help heal the world. Sarah Hilton, who's documenting poverty in India. So many really wonderful people participated in this exhibition. So I'm grateful for them. And I selected them because they all had important voice. There's Brandon Ruff, who's a police officer out of San Francisco. And what's beautiful about Photoville is that, you know, we all came together under the umbrella of photography. And a lot of us didn't know each other before. So that was my objective, to bring people around. Because I looked at their work on Instagram, a lot of ones I didn't know. And I felt they was making statements. There's a Rory Doyle who documented Black cowboys. And I felt good to just bring people together who didn't know each other at Photoville, this wonderful place that may not exist anymore. Last year might be the last one due to coronavirus. But not only did we have a great exhibition, and a lot of young people came out and were inspired, because our space was a magnet that drew a lot of people. But for me, on a personal level, so many friendships were established. You know, great friendships. I met a brother, you know, out of Detroit, who's a homicide detective, brother Harry. You know, and he's an active detective, and we developed a friendship. And he uses photography to both heal, but to help save a lot of young people. So a lot of friendships was there. But what I'm going to miss is the handshake and embrace. That might be gone forever due to this virus right now. So Photoville, as we knew it, is probably forever changed. So I'm very grateful to the folks at the United Photo Industry who provided me with an opportunity to curate that exhibition. It was one of the greatest accomplishments of my life. Besides receiving a Gordon Parks Award, just having an opportunity to curate a show meant a lot. Prior, Danny Simmons gave me an opportunity to curate an exhibition back in 2008 called Positivity, where I met over 20 young people, you know, from across the country and parts of the world who had never exhibited before, most of them. And I was able to pull them together under that show. And we did a great exhibition. And again, I want to use the language of photography to bring us together as a society, you know, and it was that language. You know, sometimes we get caught up in culture and color, but it was something about photography that spoke for itself, and we were able to have a very successful show. So hopefully if this thing passed, I want to start to act as a curator right now. I've done all I could photographically, but to serve as a curator where now I could bring people who have ability but don't have platforms to showcase their work. That would mean the world to me, because you know I grew up with the mantra, I want for my brother and sister as I want for myself. So I've had a great degree of success. So if I could help give people their first show and get established, that'll mean a lot to me. So curating is that.
Well, sign me up.
You got it, brother. You know, I want to see your work, and hopefully that time will come. But you know, there's a lot of work to be done. I don't want to be long. But again, the harvest is right, the labors are few. Let's get to work. But if you need help, my brother, and let's stay connected. And my archive is open to you. Any way I can help to enhance this program, you got it.
Well, I definitely will keep in touch offline, we'll keep in touch offline, and that's my son.
All right.
I have to call him in a minute. We'll keep in touch offline and let you know when I'll put it up on YouTube and IG. I think I have to chop it up on IG because that's long. It's a long. We went an hour and 40 minutes.
All right.
I have to figure out how to split it for Instagram.
That's a good amount.
Definitely YouTube. The whole thing can go up.
Very good.
All right.
So you take care, brother. I'll talk with you. Have a good one.
Peace.
Right, peace.